Okay, so we'll go to chapter 7, collecting qualitative data. So last time we talked about the collection of quantitative data. That's chapter 7 in the book Educational Research by John Criswell and Timothy Gutterman. So these are the learning objectives from 7.1 to 7.6. Identify the 5 process steps in collecting qualitative data. Identify different sampling approaches to selecting participants and sites. Describe the types of permissions required to gain access to participants and sites. Next is recognize the various types of qualitative data you can collect. Then 7.5, identify the procedures for recording qualitative data. 7.6, recognize the field issues and ethical considerations to anticipate in administering the data collection. So for those who have watched the 2 videos that I let you watch, were you able to watch on the informed consent that I presented in the video?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
have
sir.
you seen the format in making an informed consent, in creating an informed consent?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
The one
sir.
that you're shown.
So that would be part
Yes,
in
Sir.
7.6,
sir.
all about ethical considerations in participating research process. What are the 5 process steps in qualitative data collection? So do you see data on my slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
identify
sir.
Yes, sir.
participants and sites. No? Identify participants and sites. Gain access to individuals and sites. Identify what types of information will answer your research questions. Design protocols or instruments for collecting and recording information. So the same to what I mentioned in the collection of quantitative data, there might be a case that you are going to design your own instrument if you are not able to find one from the related literature. But of course, when you are going to develop your own instrument, you are going to undergo validation and reliability testing. Next is administer the data collection. We have qualitative researchers identify participants and sites through purposeful sampling. I mentioned in the previous videos about sampling designs, and then if you remember, I mentioned about the 2 types of sampling designs, the random sampling design and the non-random sampling design. And I assume that all of you have memorized when to use random sampling design and when to use the non-random sampling design for each of the 2. And under non-random sampling design, one of the designs in there is all about purposive sampling design. So what do we mean by purposive sampling design? You actually select or choose the respondents based on the purpose of your study. That being the researcher, you know what are the respondents, who are the respondents of your study. So based on the purpose, based on the objectives of your study, of your proposal, of your research, of your thesis, or a dissertation, you are going to identify the population and you are going to identify the samples that you can get from that population. Why we call that one as purposive sampling design? Because you choose the sample units, the members of the sample, based on the purpose of your study. So for example, you study about the lifestyles of prostitutes in Dumaguete. So the population would be all prostitutes in Dumaguete. But since you cannot enumerate the total members of the population, you cannot enumerate the total number of prostitutes in Dumaguete. You can actually identify some, but the rest cannot be enumerated. So we classify the population as infinite population, meaning some can be identified, the rest cannot be identified. And that's the reason that we are going to use non-random sampling design. And if you are going to use purposive sampling design, you are going to look at who are the prostitutes that you have identified. If you have identified Maria as one of the prostitutes, you choose Maria as one of your sample units because Maria is actually serving as a sample based on the purpose of your study, because the purpose of your study is all about the lifestyles of prostitutes in Dumaguete. Since Maria lives in Dumaguete and Maria is identified as a prostitute in Dumaguete, then you choose Maria as one of your sample units. And that is based on purposive sampling design. So the identification of the members of the population would be actually based on informants. You need informants who are those prostitutes. You need someone to identify who are those prostitutes. But of course, if you have that knowledge, you have already that prior knowledge on how to identify prostitutes, then you can do it by your own self. But based on experience, when you do that kind of study, you need informants. Second bullet, qualitative studies are usually conducted at the research site. No? Say research site, that is actually the research locale or the location where the study is actually conducted. The example that I mentioned a while ago is all about the lifestyles of prostitutes in Dumaguete. So the site is actually Dumaguete City. Qualitative studies rely on general interviews or observations, not other instruments. That's in the third bullet. The fourth one, qualitative researchers record information through self-designed protocols. When you conduct an interview, you could not actually remember what are being told during the interview. So recording, audio recording, video recording is actually very normal in a qualitative data collection. Or you need someone to jot down notes when you are going to record the data that are actually being taken from interviews. But of course, when you do the recording, it might be a video recording or audio recording. You have to include that one in your informed consent. That when you collect the data, someone will be recording or the audio will be recorded. There is a video recording, and that it has to be approved by the concerned respondents. And you have to let the respondent sign the informed consent. Why? Because you will be in trouble if you are going to just collect data through interviews, record the audio, record the video, and you don't have the permission that you're going to do. So, we do have RA on data privacy in our country, and anyone can go to jail if you are going to violate into the privacy of individuals. So we see to it that when we do research, we are not going to have intrusion on the privacy of our respondents, of our target participants. And we'll be talking about that one, the informed consent. No? It is mentioned in my previous video about informed consent. So I hope you're able to watch that one thoroughly because you are going to make an informed consent. No? Qualitative studies require sensitivity to challenges and ethical issues from gathering face-to-face information, often in homes and workplaces. So there might be some sensitive informations to be taken. Even the place might intrude privacy. So all must be incorporated in the informed consent. So if you have actually watched that video about informed consent, you will have that better perspective on what is meant by the last bullet on the slide that we're talking about. Is my audio clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what are the
Yes,
different
sir.
purposeful sampling approaches for selecting participants and sites? This is actually based on purposive sampling design under non-random sampling design. So the first bullet, intent is not to generalize to a population, but to develop an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon. I made mention already on the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. The main purpose of quantitative is to explain phenomena or phenomena. And in terms of the qualitative, it's not about explanation, it's not about generalization, but it is all about an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon. That's the major difference between qualitative and quantitative research design. We look at into explanation, we look at into generalization from the sample to the population where the sample is actually taken in a quantitative research design. But in a qualitative research design, that's not actually the main target. The main target is to develop an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon. And we don't have that idea of generalizing what we have taken from the sample to the population where the sample is actually taken. So take note of that. Quantitative research design focus is on probability. That's why we have random sampling design and we have to consider the size of the sample. And we look at into proportionality between the sample and population. That we look at into the consideration. If the population is big, then the sample must be big also. If the population is small, then the sample is also small. We look at data as a direct proportionality between sample and population. But in a qualitative research design, we don't actually do that. There might be a case that the total number of samples is actually two, or maybe three, or maybe four, maybe five, maybe six only, maybe seven from a certain population. But you are not going to consider that one in a quantitative perspective. You might say seven prostitutes. And you might say in a quantitative perspective, that's too small to collect data from prostitutes in Dumaguete. And it does not represent prostitutes in Dumaguete. Remember that the focus of qualitative research design is on an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon. And we don't have the target of generalizing what we have taken from the sample to the population where the sample is actually taken. So it's only exploration. The the quantitative is all about explanation and it's more on generalization of what you have taken from the sample to the population where the sample is actually taken. So it is mentioned in the third bullet of my slide. Qualitative focus is actually the best understanding of the central phenomenon. So here's an example, figure 7.1, difference between probability sampling and purposeful sampling design. Some authors would say purposive sampling design, some would say purposeful sampling design. So there might be variation on the terms being used, but our descriptions for both are actually the same. So random quantitative sampling. So select representative individuals to generalize from sample to population, to make claims about the population, to build or to test theories that explain the population characteristics. So those are actually the main targets of quantitative sampling design, no, in a random perspective. In terms of purposeful qualitative sampling design, select people or you're going to select sites who can best help understand our phenomenon. We look at certain phenomenon, we look at certain phenomena, and we select people from different sites, from different population that would help us understand that kind of phenomenon. And that's actually the main focus, no? Exploration or understanding the phenomenon. To develop detailed understanding. So the understanding must be detailed, and we look at into these different categories. We look at this as hold on, that might be useful information, that might help people learn about the phenomenon, that might give voice to silence people. So these are the three, no, things that we are going to consider when we look at into the objective of having a detailed understanding of the phenomenon. Number one, that might be useful information, that might help people learn about the phenomenon, that might give voice to silence people. So these are actually, no, the three specific terms that we are going to consider in the term detailed understanding of the phenomenon. So purposeful sampling. Intentionally select individuals and sites to understand the central phenomenon. Choose participants and sites that are information rich. Identify a sampling strategy based on an intent. The strategy for the sampling could be actually based on the literature. Remember, when you do research, you are going to conduct review of related literature. So with those different review of related literature, you will be given an idea how are you going to do the purposive sampling design. It's not all about creativity, but it's all about using what other researchers used in their respective researches. But if you can create your own, then that is actually much better. But of course, the one that you have created must be backed up with literature. Because if you are creating that one and you are not yet an expert, then no one would believe you. But if you are going to use a strategy based on literature and the author is actually an expert, then no one would question you because what you are using is actually based on what is being used by experts. Do you follow?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Figure 7.2, we have types of purposive sampling design. I don't actually use purposeful sampling design. As a statistician, I used to say purposive sampling design. But that is correct, no? Purposeful sampling design or purposive sampling design. So either of the two can be actually considered. Before data collection, what is the intent? So before the data collection, you are going to have that in mind. What is the intent? After the data collection, so you're going to have has started already the data collection, and what is the intent? So there are two classifications. If you look at the diagram in there, so there are two at the very beginning on top of the diagram, before data collection and after data collection. So before the data collection, what is the intent? So to develop many perspectives, to describe what is atypical to those unfamiliar with the case, to describe some subgroup in-depth perspective. And if you look at the first one, to develop many perspectives, you are going to have maximal variation sampling. So there would be many types of variation, no, of the sampling design. And then to describe what is typical to those unfamiliar with the case, so we have typical sampling. To describe some subgroup in depth, we call that one as homogeneous sampling. And then going into the bottom part of the diagram to describe particularly troublesome or enlightening cases. So extreme case sampling. Then under typical sampling, if we go down, then we have to generate a story. To generate a theory or concept. To generate a theory or concept. And you have to take note na in one of the designs under qualitative, we have grounded theory. The grounded theory research design is actually having that purpose to generate or create a theory. Out of the findings collected, being organized, being interpreted, being actually in a scientific data analysis. And from those findings, the researcher could generate a theory. And if that is actually the process, data are collected, data are presented, data are analyzed, data are interpreted, and after having the findings, conclusions, the researcher is able to come up with a theory, then that is actually part of the grounded theory. As one of the designs in a qualitative perspective. Then we call that one as critical sampling. To describe subgroup in-depth process, so homogeneous. And then the last part there is to describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation. So we have theory or concept sampling. Now, on the other side, after the data collection has started, what is the intent? To take advantage of whatever case unfolds, you look at into opportunistic sampling. There is already an opportunity to see, to meet the possible samples, so make use of that. To explore confirming or disconforming cases. So in some cases, what you have collected are actually conforming to what you have read in terms of literature, in terms of theory, in terms of models. But some cases also would actually disconform what you have read, disconform the theory, disconform the model. So we call that one as confirming or disconforming sampling. And the very bottom of data collection that has been started is on snowball sampling design. So what is a snowball sampling design? So prostitutes, for example, the example that I have given earlier. We're going to have a snowball sampling design from the word snow. How does a snowball develop? So a snowball develop not actually in a big one directly, but you're going to have a small amount of snow and you're going to mold it, forming a ball. And then you're going to add another snow, then mold that one, then add another snow, then mold that one in such a way that you're able to form a ball or into a spherical shape. So what would happen if you're going to repeat the process? The ball becomes bigger and bigger. So the snowball becomes bigger and bigger as you add snow and then mold it, then you add another amount of snow, then mold it. So that snowball is actually emanating from a small size to a bigger size. So looking into that perspective, the example that I presented, prostitutes in Dumaguete. So you can actually use a combination of purposive sampling design and snowball sampling design. So with the use of the informant, that informant can tell one prostitute. For example, Maria is identified by your informant as the prostitute. And when you verify that one Maria is really a prostitute, then after collecting data from Maria, you can ask Maria, Maria, who else can you tell me? Can you tell me other prostitutes whom you know? So basically, si Maria can tell another one because there is a saying, birds of the same feather flock together. So a prostitute can identify another prostitute, di ba? So a gay can identify another gay. A lesbian can identify another lesbian. A Maya can identify another Maya because of that statement na birds of the same feather can uh, flock together. So Maria can say, Juan is also a prostitute. So what happens to your sample? From one, it becomes two. And then after interviewing Juan, then you are going to ask Juan, who else can he tell about prostitutes in Dumaguete? So maybe Juan can tell two. Yun siya, Jose and Magdalena, prostitutes also in Dumaguete. So what happened to the samples? From one, it becomes two. From two, it becomes four. So as you continue the process, you're able to come up with an increasing size of the sample. And that's the concept of snowball sampling design. Do you follow?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So we have purposeful sampling, maximal variation sampling design. So sample cases that differ on characteristics or traits. Example characteristics. Different age groups, different racial background, different sites. So these are what we call maximal variation sampling. They differ in terms of characteristics, different in terms of age groups or brackets, different in terms of racial background, or different in terms of the sites or the locations. In terms of extreme case sampling, study an outlier case or one that has extreme characteristics, particularly troublesome or enlightening, noticeable for success or failure, cited by others. So, if that person has been cited by many people, that could be part of extreme case sampling. If you're going to say noticeable for success, then that is actually part of extreme case sampling. Or noticeable for failures, that is part of extreme case. So when you say extreme, it can be on one side or on the other side. It can be in the positive or it can be in the negative perspective. In terms of typical sampling, study person or site that is typical, concerned with what is typical or normal, may find based on demographic data or survey data. So example, typical faculty member with long experience. In terms of theory or concept sampling, help to generate or discover a theory. Discover concepts within a theory based on concept or theory expected to emerge. So example, select sites to generate a theory of student attitudes toward online education. So that's an example. No? As I mentioned, when we say theory or concept sampling, it's actually having that purpose nga from the data collected, you're going to develop or create a theory. If not a theory, it might be a model. Or if not a theory, if not a model, it could be a concept. We have homogeneous sampling. Select sites or participants based on membership in a subgroup with defined characteristics. So, membership in a subgroup with defined characteristics. Uh, for example, gays who are actually wearing feminine attire. That could be what part of the homogeneous sampling. Or gays who do not actually wear feminine attire. There are actually gays that are actually gays in reality, but they don't wear uh, attire for female. They don't also apply makeup. And that could be part of the homogeneous sampling. You could not just say a group of gays, no? A population of gays, but gays can actually be classified into different subgroups. So We call that one as variation in purposive sampling design. So you must study the characteristics of your population, and that from that characteristics of the population, you are going to subdivide that big population in such a way that you're able to come up with a group having homogeneous characteristics. So for example, gay. Uh, population of gays. No? So that can be divided into many subgroups. No? So a group of gays nga wearing feminine attire. A group of gays nga just wear the attire of normal men or boys. And then, with that case, you consider that one as homogeneous group, wherein that group has a homogeneous characteristic. But when you are going to look at into the variation of purposive sampling design, one group can only have one common characteristic, and the other characteristics can be assumed to be constant. No? Now, you only consider one characteristic as homogeneous. The rest could not be classified as homogeneous. I repeated that one many times that you must actually look at the characteristics of your population. All possess similar trait or characteristic. So I mentioned that one. All possess similar trait or characteristic. Pareha ang mga gay nga nag-makeup, pareha nga nag-cross-dress. That is actually what? A similar trait or a similar characteristic. Identify characteristics and find sites or individuals that possess such. Example, all parents in school parenting program. So all of those are parents and they belong to a school parenting program. Critical sampling. So individuals or sites represent central phenomenon dramatically. Exceptional case to learn about central phenomenon. For example, study teenage violence in school that experience a gun incident. So what is actually part of a critical sampling? Because a gun incident is not actually normal and it's classified in a critical perspective. Opportunistic sampling. So take advantage of unfolding events. Sample emerges through the research process. So example, pregnancy of individual leads to unique ability to understand central phenomena. So we say opportunistic sampling design, you can actually do that if you have some literature in terms of research findings. Do you follow?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And then
Sir.
snowball sampling design. So proceeds after study begins because researcher may not know the best people to study as participants to recommend others. I mentioned that one already earlier about snowball sampling design. Then confirming and disconfirming sample. So follow up on specific cases to test or explore findings further. Verify accuracy of findings. So you're able to look at into data that does not conform the model or the theory. So what you are going to do, you're going to follow up those different respondents and ask why. If, shall we say, they conform to the theory, they conform to the model, then you want to have further confirmation, then you go back to the respondents, you go back to the subjects and ask why. And that could be part of that statement in the second bullet, verify accuracy of findings. So you got the finding already, but you need to verify on the accuracy of that finding. So what you are going to do, you go back to the target respondents, you go back to the sample units and ask further clarifications to validate. No? Some researchers would say na it's on the validation process. So example, learn that department chairs act as mentors. Confirm role by sampling those identified as good mentors. Sample size or number of research sites. Small for in-depth perspective. So we look at into a small size of the population. That's very normal in a qualitative research design, small, because our purpose is an in-depth perspective or in-depth understanding. Few individuals, few cases, so 30 to 40 in some situations, but in some cases less than 30, in some cases less than 20, and in some cases less than 10, depending on the nature of the population that is being considered in the qualitative study. Collecting and analyzing qualitative data takes time. So it would take time because you are going to have an in-depth interview. And of course, during the interview, you are not going to say directly, I am blah, 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 and all the blah, 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 until directly on the purpose of your research. But you have to win first the rapport of the target respondent, the target participant. And then you are going to follow some protocols, which I will be discussing later. What are the protocols when you conduct an interview in a qualitative research design? And then seek institutional review board approval. If you have watched the video on quantitative data collection, I mentioned about informed consent, and I mentioned about IRB. How many of you have watched the acronym IRB in my previous videos? Hello?
Me, sir.
Okay, that's good. So of the 35, only one is
Me,
able to
sir.
watch that IRB.
Me, sir. That's me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Me,
Me,
sir.
sir.
Okay.
Sir.
Again, what is IRB?
Institutional
International Review
Institutional
Board.
Review
Regional
Board.
Review Board.
Institutional Review Board.
Institutional
Okay.
Review Board.
So IRB, Institutional Review Board. And the focus of the IRB is on the ethical standards, the ethical considerations that you are going to follow in conducting the entire research process. So at NORSU, we have that. We have an IRB, and it's actually located at the Vice President for Research, Innovation, Development, and Extension. And it's headed by Dr. Mireveka Katada. And the chair of our IRB is, I forgot the name, so sorry. Geraldine Quinones. No? Geraldine Quinones. So, gain permission from gatekeepers at the research site. I'll be talking about gatekeepers later. So gatekeepers are individuals at the site who provide site access, help researcher locate people, and identify places to study. I mentioned the term informant. No? So informant or gatekeeper. So in some cases, they actually interchange. No? Some would use gatekeeper and some would use informant. The gatekeeper may require written information about the project. So seek institutional review board approval. So here at NORSO, it is not yet a part of the policy, like undergoing thesis in the undergraduate program and even the thesis and dissertation in the graduate school that deal with human beings. We're not able to institutionalize the seeking of approval from the ethics committee or the IRB. But siguro later that could be institutionalized. But it's good to have that, even if it's not mandatory. But it's good to follow that one so that we will not be in trouble on the data collection if in case we're able to harm some people who are included in our research. On all of the time, we're going to follow data privacy. Second is on develop detailed description of procedures, detail how you will protect anonymity, discuss the need to respect the site and minimize disruption. So all of these, no, from bullet number 1, bullet number 2, bullet number 3, and bullet number 4, you can actually have a better understanding for this if you have watched the video that I posted, uploaded in our stream. No? And that is actually on the topic informed consent. If you remember, what are the different parts of an informed consent? Some mention that you have watched the video, and some mention that you have actually seen that one in the video, informed consent. So could anyone tell me what are the components of informed consent as I presented that one in the video? Anyone?
Herrera, sir. Me,
Okay,
sir.
Miss Herrera, go ahead.
Okay, sir. So, from what I've watched in that video, at the end of your video, sir, that informed consent, we can find their introduction, purpose
Mhm,
of the study, the procedures, benefits, and we need to state there if there is indeed like a payment to the participant, or we should
mhm.
put there is no payment in the participant, and it should be put there nga kanang all caps gani, sir.
Yeah.
And also confidentiality, refusal to sign consent, and authorization. There is
Mhm.
a portion there that we need to put there nga, if they can cancel this consent and authorization, questions about the participation and where it will be directed to, participant certification, participant's name, date, and signature. That's it,
Okay,
sir.
perfect. Perfect. You have mentioned all the components in an informed consent. Thank you very much. So, next is on describe opportunities to reciprocate, develop detailed description of the procedures from step 1 up to the last step. Acknowledge that you may adopt participant beliefs, specify power imbalances, detailed time requirement at the site, provide a list of interview questions. So part of the informed consent should be the list of interview questions. Because there might be some cases na some of the questions are sensitive and you are not going to force the respondents, the participants, to answer those sensitive questions. So you have to indicate, no, in the informed consent that these are actually the guide questions, and these questions are sensitive, and it's voluntary to answer the sensitive questions. And are you not going to ask me what are sensitive questions? Or who can tell me what are sensitive questions?
Like about their personal life, sir, that they're not
Personal life.
uncomfortable
What, for
to tell.
example? Could you give me an example nga sensitive question?
Maybe
Me,
about
sir.
sex
Private
life nila,
data,
sir.
sir.
Okay, okay. Wait for I sige. Kindly raise your the hit the raise hand button para I can recognize you. Sige, Kiana first.
Okay, sir. In sensitive questions are questions, sir, that can be intrusive to the privacy of the respondent, and some of
Sige.
these
Give me
questions are
example.
okay.
Just one
Example,
example.
sir, is have you ever had an abortion?
Okay. Yeah. So, have you ever had an abortion? Okay. Next,
Herrera,
Zaira
sir.
Kinol.
Um,
Herrera, then Zaira Kinol.
Dular, sir.
Sige.
Okay, Herrera, sir. Um, I believe I the private data, sir, it is also one of the sensitive information. For example, medical data, and also their,
Yeah, what medical data, for example?
for example, sir, if they have cases of STD, sexually transmitted
Okay.
disease,
Asking about
and
mga venereal diseases. Yeah, that's okay. I agree. What else? Thank you, Miss Herrera. Miss Kinol.
thank
Sarong,
you, sir.
sir. Yes, sir. Sensitive questions, sir, are questions that they don't want to answer, sir. For example, like what Herrera said, those medical conditions. For example, you are interviewing a a respondent who has AIDS, so it would be insensitive of us to ask whether, how, or when did she acquire such disease, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Rosel Rota.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I will just give an example, sir. Like, sa imuhang gingon, sir, katong prostitute. So, mag-conduct kag survey about the prostitute. So, sensitive questions are those like, moingon ka, and how many, ikapila ka naka-sex sa, ingana, sir ba? Sa usa ka
Yes. Yeah,
person, ingana,
perfect.
sir. That's sir.
Yeah.
That would be
Jusita
also.
Bactol. That's correct.
Yes,
Jusita.
sir. Good morning. So, mga taga kog example, sir, is like
Go
about
ahead.
political, sir.
Mhm.
Like, mo ana ka dito, sir, sa imong respondents nga. Example, sir, kanang example ka Digamo or ka Teves, like mayon ka dito nga, are you in favor with Governor Digamo or are you in favor with Governor Teves? Yun na, sir.
Okay. I agree. Christine Dolor.
So for me, sir, the examples are like for the answer asking question about their spiritual beliefs and their sexuality, sir, because some people are not really open about their
Yeah.
sexuality yet.
So,
And then their spiritual beliefs, sir, is I think they find it very kind of offending if you will question about it and then you don't have the same beliefs, sir.
yeah, that's very true, no? I was actually with my advisee 3 years ago, and then the respondents of his study, gay faculty members of Negros Oriental State University system. But I told him, can you identify all of the gay faculty members at Norsu? Siya, yes, sir, no problem at all. Ko, okay, are you sure? Siya, yes, sir, no problem. Okay. So when the proposal was approved by the committee and he's into data collection, he approached me and said, sir, ikaw lang maghatag aning questionnaire ni blah blah blah, sir. Why? So wala maguna siya ni ingon, sir, nga bayot siya, sir. Inko, di ba at the very beginning, I told you, can you identify all gay faculty members at Norso? And you told me, yeah, you can do it. At manong apil-apilan ko nimo. Although I'm your advisor, but do it by yourself. Because asking, sir, bayot ka or dili, that is actually very offensive. You need someone, you need a gatekeeper, you need an informant, and you have to win the rapport of that individual. So you have to follow some protocols, and it's so difficult to prove, that someone is actually a gay. In some cases, very obvious that someone looks like a gay, but actually not, according to his version. Is that true, women?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Not a
Mhm.
Yes,
feminine.
sir.
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
Siya, dili mo siya gay, sir, kay minyo, magod na. But are you sure nga all men are straight, all men nga married are not gay? So are you sure?
Na yung mga in denial,
na
sir.
bisexual, sir,
Yeah.
pansexual,
Oh,
and
Mr. On. I guess si Mr. Abuso lang ang no? Ang man of this section. So Mr. Abuso, could you tell me your concern?
Actually, sir, I'm bisexual, sir. Then I have
Oh, I
this
like that.
sensor. I have this sensor nga makasense ko if kanang tao ba nga kuan siya, sir, straight siya or dili, pero dili jud ko ma-approach niya, pero makasense gyud, sir, kay it takes one to know one biya, sir.
Yeah, I mentioned that one earlier in my talk.
Yes,
Di
sir.
ba? Birds of the same feather flock together. Who can identify nga that person is a gay? Also a gay. Who can tell nga that blah 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 is a blah blah blah? So only that person in the same category. But there might be some exceptions, no? It's not all the time true. So thank you very much, no, for your sharing. And thank you, Mr. Abuso, for being honest. No? Hello, Mr.
Actually,
Abuso.
sir, kuan mong good, sir. Open na po ko sa family, then in relationship would go with gay man, sir.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yes, sir.
No?
Thank you,
Sana
sir.
all. Okay, sige. Acknowledge, you may adapt participant beliefs and then provide the list of interview questions. I mentioned that one. Para you can classify what are sensitive and what are not. Gatekeepers. Could you read that one, Mr. Abuso, the characteristics of gatekeepers?
The characteristic of gatekeeper, sir, is why their site was chosen, and then what time and resources are required, then what will be accomplished at the site, what potential there is for you, there is for your presence to be disruptive, what individuals at the site will gain from the study, and how you will use and report the results, sir.
Okay, so all of these must be presented to the gatekeepers so that everything that are needed can be prepared by the gatekeepers. So not in the case nga you are at the site and then you are going to tell the person, I need this one, but you did not tell that one in advance. So what will happen? You could not actually collect the data because what you need is not actually present in the site or during the conduct of the interview. Next, what type of qualitative data will you collect? So we have observations, we have interviews, and then through questionnaires, documents. No? Most of the time, documents, then audiovisual materials. So table 7.1 forms of qualitative data collection. So the table has 3 columns. First column, forms of data collection. Second column, type of data. And then the third column, definition of type of data. So could you read that one? I'll call someone. Alison, Saron. Miss
Yes,
Alison.
sir.
Okay.
Forms of
Read it by
yes, sir.
row,
Am
no?
I
Not by
audible, sir?
column. Read it one by row.
Oh, okay, sir. So forms of data collection. So for observation, the type of data is field notes and drawings. The definition of type of data, unstructured text data and pictures taken during observation by the researcher. So the next, interviews and questionnaires form of data collection, types of data, transcription of open-ended interviews or open-ended questions and questionnaires, definition of type of data, unstructured data obtained from transcribing audio recordings of interviews by transcribing open-ended responses to questions and questionnaires. So for documentation, for the documents, the type of data, it is hand-recorded notes about documents or optically scanned documents. So definition of type of data, public, for example, notes from meetings, and private, example, journals, records available to the researcher. So the last one is audio visual material. So the type of data, it is pictures, photographs, video recording, objects, and sound. So for the definition of data of type, audio visual material consisting of image or sounds of people or place recorded by the researcher or someone else.
Okay. Thank you. So we have observations. No? So observational roles. Could you read that one? Nessa Caliao.
So yes, An observation is the process of gathering first-hand information by observing people and places at a research site, while observational roles includes participant observer and an observation excuse me, an observational role adapted by researchers when they take part in activities in the setting they observe. Second one is the non-participant observer, which is an observer who visits a site and records notes without becoming involved in the activities of the participants. Note that observational roles can be changed.
Okay. Riza, Chua,
Yes, sir.
could you read the process of observing?
Okay, sir. So the process of observing first is to select a site that will help you understand the central phenomenon and obtain the required permissions to gain access to the site. Next is to ease into the site slowly by looking around, getting a general sense of the site, and taking limited notes, at least initially. Next is identify who or what to observe, when to observe, and how long to observe. And lastly, determine initially your role as an observer.
Okay, so it's very important, not no, as an observer, what is your specific role? Next, Dempol, Wagan. Dempol, Wagan.
So, yes, sir. So observations, the process of observing. First is conduct multiple observations over time to obtain the best understanding of the site and the individuals. Second, design some means for recording notes during an observation. Third, consider what information to record. This descriptive field notes describe the events, activities, and people. Reflective field notes record personal reflections that relate to their insights, hunches, or broad themes that emerge. Fourth is remain unob- unobtrusive, and lastly is when complete, slowly withdraw from the site.
Okay. So figure 7.5 is what we call an observational checklist. So you can find two columns no, in figure 7.5. Could you read that one? Maricon Mirabeles. Maricon?
Yes,
Maricon.
sir.
Read that one by
Yes, sir.
row, no, that by column.
Did you gain permission to study the site? Do you know your role as an observer? Do you have a means for recording field notes, such as an observational protocol? Do you know what you will observe first? Will you enter and leave the site slowly so as not to disturb the setting? Will you make multiple observations over time? Will you develop rapport with individuals at the site? Will your observations change from broad to narrow? Will you take limited notes at first? Will you take both descriptive as well as reflective notes? Will you describe incomplete sentences so that you have detailed field notes? Did you thank your participants at the site?
Okay. So in figure 7.5, from the first column to the second column, what are the possible answers of these questions? Could you tell me? Anyone? What are the possible questions of the different questions mentioned in figure 7.5 in both columns? Hello? What are the possible answers?
Could be either yes or no, sir.
Yes or
Yes
no,
or
sir.
sir.
Yes or
Perfect.
no?
So it's either a yes or a no. So what do you think should be the answer for all of these when you undergo observation process? Yes or no?
It
Yes.
should be
Yes,
yes,
sir.
yes,
Question.
sir.
All
Should
of
be
these
yes,
questions are
sir.
answerable by
Yes.
yes or no. But if you were the concerned observer, what would be the answer of these different questions for you
The
to
common
be
answer.
identified as a very good observer?
The common answer should be yes.
Okay, that should be yes. For example, in the last one, did you thank your participants at the site? So if yes, that's perfect. But if you say no, that's unethical. Number one, did you gain permission to study the site? If yes, okay, you follow the protocol. But if no, that's not according to the protocol. Do you follow?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Next, all about interviews. Rachel Panulde, could you read what is on the
Uh,
slide?
okay, sir. So in the types of qualitative data will you collect? So the interviews, types of interviews, and open-ended questions on questionnaires. So we have here the types. We have the one-on-one, focus group, phone, web-based video, and email. In the general open-ended questions that are asked, allow the participants to create options for responding. The second one is to voice their experiences and perspectives, and information is recorded, then transcribed for analysis.
Okay, so that's the best practice, no? When you interview someone, you could not actually do the interviewing and then writing of the responses. But the best way is someone should record, or if not, you have actually a recording device and you're going to record when you have started the interview. But of course, that should have actually included in the informed consent. Na during the interview, you're going to record the proceedings. That must be agreed by the respondents or the target participants. Next, conducting interviews. Disema, Diseme, Hamosmos.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Conducting interviews. First, identify the interviewees. Second, determine the type of interview you will use. Example, focus, a focus group one-on-one. Third, record the audio of the conversation. And fourth, take brief notes during the interview. Fifth, locate a quiet, suitable place. And last, obtain consent from the interviewee to participate in the study.
Okay. Next, Irene Elnar.
Yes, sir. So interviews, conducting interviews. So during the interview, have an interview plan using your interview protocol, but be flexible. Second, use groups to elicit more information, include possible prompts in your interview protocol, use prompts to elaborate and clarify, then be cautious and professional when the interview is over.
Okay. So you have to be courteous and professional when the interview is actually over. You're going to say thank you very much. That's all that I would be asking in the entire research process. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you for giving me your candid answer to the different questions. Okay, table 7.2, types of probes used in qualitative interviewing. Jolly Istinopo, could you read that one?
Yes, sir. Good morning. So, table 7.2, types of probes used in qualitative interviewing. So, we have there a question in the study as, what has happened since the event that you have been involved in? Assume that the interviewee says not much or simply does not answer. So, examples in clarifying probes, probe areas, comments to other students. Tell me about discussions you had with other students. Then the role of parents. Did you talk with your parents? And then the role of news media. Did you talk with any media personnel? And then examples in elaborating probes. Um, Tell me more. Second, could you explain your response more? And then third, I need more detail. And the last one, what does that much mean?
So it is mentioned in the previous slide that you are going to have a plan on the items to be asked during the interview. So you have question number one, number two, number three, so forth and so on. But you need to be flexible. So there might be some cases when the respondent or the participant is able to answer you, but you're not able to get what's the idea presented in the answer. Then you need to have another one, no? A follow-up. Could you explain what you mean by blah, blah, blah? Or the statement presented on the slide, tell me more about it. Or what does it mean when you say blah, blah, blah? You're not able to get what is mentioned on the answer, so you need to have a follow-up question. So we call that one as elaborating probes. Figure 7.6 is the checklist for interviewing. Jusita Bacton, could you read those different checklists? Jusita. Jusita? Or I'll just call James Earl Abuso.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Ay,
Jusita, are you
Lag akong phone, sir.
sige.
Yes,
Okay
sir.
na.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Jusita.
So, the first one is that who will participate in your interviews? Second, what types of interviews are best to conduct? Third, is the setting for your interview comfortable and quiet? Fourth, if you are audio taping, have you prepared and tested the equipment? Fifth, did you obtain consent from the participants to participate in the interview? Six, did you listen more and talk less during the interview? Seven, did you probe during the interview or ask to clarify and elaborate? Seven, did you avoid leading questions and ask open-ended questions? Nine, did you keep participants focused and ask for concrete details? 10, did you withhold judgments and refrain from debating with participants about their views? 11th, did you withhold offering advice and suggestions and focus in the task of gathering participant views? 12, number 12, were you courteous and did you thank the participants after concluding the interview?
Okay. So there's a statement there, no? Never argue, never have a debate, no, with the participants. Just record on what they are able to answer, no, in the different questions that you're actually asking. So if you look at figure 7.6, all of these questions are answerable by what? The questions that start with did, then blah, blah, blah. Are they answerable by yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Ano
sir.
na yung mga
Yes,
did,
sir.
But for
It's
the
answerable
who,
by yes.
what, then the statement that asks on if you are audio taping, then they are open-ended questions. So those are the different checklists for interviewing, and all must be addressed, no, during the conduct of the interview and even before the conduct of the interview and after the conduct of the interview. Okay, next, documents, collecting documents. James, could you read it one?
yes, sir. In collecting documents, identify types of documents that may be useful. Consider public and private documents. Obtain permission before using documents. Provide specific instructions if you ask participants to keep a journal. Examine for accuracy, completeness, and usefulness. Optically scan documents when possible.
Okay, so they are all self-explanatory. Next, audiovisual materials. Annabelle Andrade.
Yes, sir. So, audio-visual materials, image or sound to help understand the central phenomenon, Examples are photographs, video records, digital image, paintings, and drawings. And it is are more difficult to analyze. That's all, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next, we go to audiovisual materials, the collection of audiovisual materials. Christine Dolor.
Yes, sir. So audiovisual materials, collecting audiovisual materials. Determine what material can provide evidence to address your research questions. Determine what visual material is available and obtain permission to use it. Check the accuracy and authenticity of the material if you do not record it yourself. And then lastly, collect the data and organize it.
Okay, thank you. Next, the use of protocols. We have interview protocol. Nes Caliao. Nes Caliao.
Yes, sir. So using protocols and interview protocol. So what is interview protocol? It is an instruction for the process of the interview. Also, it is the questions to be asked, possible probes associated with each questions, and space to take notes on responses from the interviewee. That's it, sir. Thank you.
Continuation, Ria Joy Alaban for using protocols.
Okay, so the header, essential information about the interview, such as purpose, reminder to obtain consent and record. Next is open-ended questions, which includes icebreaker, questions that address major research questions, and probes that clarify and elaborate. Next is include space between each question for notes, and the last one is closing comments, thanking the participant.
Okay, thank you very much. Then figure 7.7, sample interview protocol. So we have project, so you have to mention the project. So example, there's university reaction to a gunman incident. Time of interview must be indicated, the date, the place, the name of the interviewer, the name of the interviewee. But of course, for confidentiality, the name of the interviewee should be coded, and then the position, and then the questions must be enumerated. Then next, we go into what procedures will be used to record data. Could you read that one, Mary Albert Akab?
Yes, sir. So using protocols and observational protocol. First is used for taking field notes during an observation. Second, in the header, record information about the time, place, setting, your observational role. Third, divide the rest of the protocol into two columns. These are the left column to record descriptive notes about the activities at the site, right column to record reflective notes about themes, quotes, and personal experiences at the site, and lastly, include a sketch of the site.
Okay. Then what field and ethical issue need to be anticipated? You have the field issues. Kati Dongkoy. Kati,
Okay, sir. So
could you read the field
field
issues?
issues. Yes, sir. So field issues, first is sufficient access to the site for data collection. So sufficient time for the data collection, limit initial collection to 1 or 2 observations or interviews. Then time is needed to establish a substantial database. Then second is observational role. Third, building rapport with participants. Then lastly, obtaining permission to use documents and audiovisual materials.
Okay, so take note of the field issues. Then ethical issues. What are those different things? Gina May Palaya.
Yes, sir. Ethical issues. The first one, informing participants of purpose. The second one, refraining from deceptive practices. The third one, sharing your role as researcher. The fourth one, being respectful of the research site, and then giving back or reciprocity, using ethical interview practices, maintaining confidentiality, and the last one, collaborating with participants.
Okay. Then revisiting the mother's trust in principal's qualitative study. So could you read it on Catherine Badon?
Yes, sir. So first is wrote, they plan on conducting a qualitative case study, provide a justification for the use of the qualitative case study approach to understand processes across many cases, and discuss purposeful sampling and snowball sampling to recruit heterogeneous sample and aware of field issues, and also small sample. And the last one is face-to-face interviews and provide topics of questions.
Okay. So that's the last one. So I'm going to post the recorded video for our lesson today so that you can have a review for those different topics. So thank you very much.